Welcome everyone for a new session of our Blue Justice webinar. And we're very happy to host Benjamin Dudouet today. Benjamin is based at the University of Santiago de Compostela in Spain, currently doing his PhD with Professor Sebastián Villasante, and working on equity and the social contract of fisheries management systems. And so this is really very topical for our webinar. And today, Benjamin is going to be talking about a theoretical framework to assess equity in fisheries management systems. So thanks a lot for making time to present your work, Benjamin, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks for this invitation. And so I will just share my screen there and this one. Okay, thanks. Could you all see my screen? Yeah, okay, great. So thanks. So as Olivier told you, I'm working from the University of Santiago de Compostela in the Cretus lab within the Equality group, which is coming from an ERC grant project with Sebastián Villasante, but also with Olivier and also with Arne Kainz on this thesis. I'm more or less in the middle of my journey, so that's the mid-trip exercise. And I will talk about equity in fisheries management system and present to you this theoretical framework that will be applied, and I will show you some examples of how the framework could be applied in different management systems. So quick introduction and the first question. So if we imagine that we're in the European context within the common fisheries policy, which allow a total allowable catch to the different stocks. So if we take the example of the hake in the Bay of Biscay, so France will receive part of the stack, Spain will receive the other part of the stack for the Bay of Biscay, which correspond to these two abbreviation, hake and all the numbers and letters. And if we imagine two vessels, the orange one, the Spanish one, the blue one, the French one, these two vessels will receive a quota, will receive a fishing rights. There's two vessels, what could be the equitable situation for these two vessels, which could be exactly the same size, the same characteristics, and what could be the equitable solution? And if there is any solution, are the solution equitable? Because they are targeting the same common resource. So I will not give you the answer now, but we will see it later. But first, why do we need equity in this context of harvesting a common resource? So why equity? So first, to avoid the tragedy of the common, that we know that it's a renewable resource, a common one. So if we all go together to harvest it, we'll face the tragedy of this common. So to avoid this overexploitation, we will need a collective organization. And to avoid this race for fish within the collective organization, we will need rights of harvesting. And to well organize these rights, we'll need equity. All these needs to well organize the fisheries will need consent, will need legitimacy within these rights. So we'll need a social contract to go from the state of nature, which is a complete free riding and open access fisheries, to civil states from the Rousseau social contract theory, which is a recognized and legitimate organization with, for example, the tag, license, some zones, just an organized fishery. For a few definitions, we talk about consent from the Hume definition, because the consent allows justice and it produces a feeling of common interest, which what we need in this common ground and common resource exploitation, the feeling of common interest in going to harvest it. And then the social contract enable individual to enjoy equal rights, duties, and freedom within the same the same system. And the legitimacy could be seen as the quality of being reasonable and acceptable. So altogether, this characteristic could be produce an equitable situation within the system. So, this situation could let the system going from the state of nature to the civil state with a set of norms and rules. So from that and the literature review, we found that the equity in fisheries management system could be focused on the legitimacy of a consented collective organization, which is more or less the social contracts, who get the purpose to benefit the collective interests by distributing the social primary goods and capabilities. And from the theory of justice, a social primary good, it's a rights, a liberties, an income, and a wealth, which correspond more or less, if we look at a fishery, more or less a right to access the fishery. And capabilities from the Amartya Sen theories is the reflect of freedom, the freedom an individual has to lead a particular life. So what are the social primary goods and capabilities in the fisheries management? It's the right to access the fishery. It's representing a liberty, it's representing an income and a wealth for the individual fishers and the industry. So it's also the reflection of the freedom of a fishing in the fishing strategy of a fishing vessel owner or any producers. So we can see at least the social primary goods and capabilities as the fishing possibilities and fishing right to access and harvest the common resource. So the equity in fisheries management could be the organization of the distribution of their social primary goods and capabilities within an organization which should be legitimate and consented to be equitable. So now, why all this social contract is organized within the fishery? We saw that there is rights, there are responsibilities, there's rights, so these rights imply responsibilities, and these rights and responsibilities will imply costs and benefits, because the right is also benefits, but it will also imply cost of organization. So the rights will be legally or morally right to do or to get something. The responsibilities will come with the freedom of doing something with the right. Some responsibility will arrive, and the cost and benefits are the intangible. It's the fair sharing from growth, and it's tangible and intangible of allocating resources. They will be received. The costs and benefits are organized, the distribution of rights and responsibilities. At this will be the description of the social contract. We'll come back on that to describe it and to apply it to the fisheries management system. We select and identify 3 steps, which are the decision-making steps, the context, finally, or the fishing is globally organized and in an interannual scale, or then it's managed at the annual or seasonal scale, and then all these rights are really distributed during the season, during the year, at the at the infra-annual scale. And there's steps are well defined by the theory, and particularly to the institutional economic theory, which the first step could be the first order economizing, which is the institutional environment, which will set the formal games rule at an interannual scale, and will produce a context for the fishery. Then the management, which is a second order economizing. So the first step could be, for example, in France or in Europe, the CPF, the Common Fisheries Policy, could be this context, or in any countries, the law set by the law set by the government to organize the fishery, like the Code Rural in France. The management step, which is the second order economizing, is the governance structure, the way of using the rules set by the context at the seasonal scale, at the annual scale. And it will be all the process every year. It will produce internal results every year of how the fisheries is working, which, for example, in France could be every year we will distribute the quotas to the POs to be distributed then to the fishers. It's the annual scale. And then the last step, the distribution, which is the infra-annual, is the third order economizing, which will set the margin conditions and which clearly is the allocation and use of these rights at the daily basis, at the daily scale during the whole season, which will produce the external results, and which could be the control, for example, of the use of the rights or the reallocation during the year, which it's more about the adaptive management. All at each step, a set of rules is necessary to be organized, to organize the step and the management at each step, sorry. And these rules are really close to the rolling news from Ostrom, which said to resolve the social dilemma, we need to move from norms to a hierarchical set of rules. These rules could permit to organize the system, which clear and well-identified rules which will organize the system of all the different characteristics that the system needs. And for example, the first rules are about the different stakeholders with the position, the boundary, and the allocation rules, which are more or less the three on the, I don't know if you see the pointer, but the three on the left there are about the stakeholders and the different, what are the roles of the stakeholders on what they can do, what they can't do, and how they will do that. The three there, the fourth one is about the decision process, then about the information, what kind of information, all the information can be used, then about the scope of the system. The payoff is about the distribution rules, who would receive what, and then the scope rules, which is more about the purpose of the system, what's the objective of the system. And then the potential outcome depending of this purpose. So we will use these rules to analyze and describe the system, and within these rules we will apply then attributes to understand well how it's working, and if these rules are well defined in the system, because if these rules are well defined, the system could be at least clear and consented and legitimate to be equitable. So then these rules will, as we see before, create some costs of management. So the transaction costs, which are the resource used to define, establish, maintain, and transfer property rights, and to create these rules. To create these rules, we'll need some infrastructure, we'll need time, we'll need information, and all of that are the transaction costs. So there are 6 different transaction costs, and maybe there we will not talk about property right, but we'll talk about these rules, and these rules will permit to transfer, establish, maintain the rights of fishing. There is 6 rules there, which are more or less explicit about information, research information, enactment on legislation, the design of the rules, the contracting necessary to create the rules, the monitoring of detection after that, and the prosecution and enforcement if necessary. And this cost could be the source of inequity, depending on the capacity of institutions or individuals to support it, because if the rules are necessary in the system, they imply costs. But if these costs are not well supported by the whole system, but at least maybe not equally supported by all the actors and all stakeholders, the rules could be better implemented in some points or better applied in others. So this cost could be one first step to analyze the inequity within the system. Because if there is some mechanisms or institutions that are able to support the cost for other stakeholders, it could be more equitable and more easy to apply the rules or to understand the rules for some users than others. So now, just for a quick conclusion of this part, so the whole social contract is more or less this one. There is 3 steps: the decision-making, the management, the distribution. For each step, there is a set of rules. For all these rules will imply transaction costs, all the costs, and all the rules will distribute rights, responsibilities, and benefits to the users and all the stakeholders, which is more or less the resume of the fisheries social contract. So now, thanks to all the analysis of this social contract and the literature review, we identified some attributes to evaluate, to attributes of equity, to be sure that it's consent, there is a social contract, and it's legitimate. So within the system, the idea is to evaluate these attributes within the rules to identify if the rules is clearly defined, if the responsibilities of the rules is clearly defined, if it's legitimate, and if there is some mechanisms and institutions to support the management costs, which are the transaction costs. In the application of a concrete fisheries, which could be the hake fisheries in France or in Spain. Okay, so to analyze, to analyze it and to evaluate these attributes, the rules with these attributes, we create a scoring system of 31 questions. The whole question are there. So for each step, the context, the season, and the distribution, so the interannual, the annual, and the infra-annual step, we applied and we analyzed the rules. So the first rules, there are not all the rules that we see before, because we just synthesized the 3 first rules and just modify it a little bit to be more concise. So we find at each step all the rules and then all the attributes. And for each attribute of each rules, we find a bunch of questions to set a score and to analyze the fisheries management system. Now I will show you some examples. Now we will first go back to our first question, sorry. So within this European context, with 2 countries sharing maritime area where there is a stock of fish, that there is right to fish. So the 2 countries share this tax, so they receive each one a quota. France and Spain, or will they distribute this quota? And for 2 fishers, 2 vessels, do these 2 vessels should receive the same one? Should they receive a different one? On which criteria? And should they receive the same rights? And if they receive the same rights, should it be the equitable situation? So this is an example, and to be honest, I don't have the right answer. I don't know which could be the equitable situation. I'm not, maybe the fishers, maybe the Spanish one, will receive a part, the French one another one, but it will depend of how they receive it and if they took part of the system of the whole decision process. And even if the part is different, they could be satisfied with this part because the whole decision process is equitable for them. So the next slides, I will just show you some example of the scoring system which are just few illustrative results, just to get an idea of what kind of result we could expect with the scoring system and with this framework. So, for example, we did it for France and Spain, which this one are the results for the context and at the internal scale step. So we can see that there is some difference, and I will just focus. So just up there is the stakeholder rules, the decision process, then the information, the right distribution there, and the purpose with 11 questions. And for example, within France and Spain, we can focus on these points, that the two first one, which are the clarity of the definition of the stakeholders and the clarity of the definition of the decision process. We can see that both country, part of the CFP, are under more or less the same context. Then there are some national particularities because of the different governments and law, but there is a common context, at least. And there's two contexts. The same context is quite clear within the CFP. We know within the CFP who gets the rights, and all these rights are decided within, and what is the decision process. So we can see there that there is a kind of high score of the clarity of these two rules. Then at the seasonal scale, we can see the same structure exactly, and we can focus there on another results. On these institutions supporting the annual collective decision process. In the two countries, there is a high score, because in the two contexts, there is some institutions supporting the fisheries policy. In France, there is some POs, there are committees which are involved in the annual decision process or supporting directly the annual decision of distributing, for example, the rights. And in Spain, there is in the Atlantic coast a network of cofradías, which are in every port, supporting also the whole system. So it's an example of high score because the scores are completely supported by some institution, and the scores are reduced for at least the states and the individual fisheries. Then, for example, at this point of in the distribution of the rights, the individual quota it's clear. It's the question here was the clarity of the right distribution. And because the Spanish system is more centralized, so the two countries is targeting the same stock, but because the Spanish system is more centralized in this topic, it's the government directly allocating the annual quota to the vessels at the beginning of the year, and they are publishing publicly the list of quota to every vessels, which is less centralized in France. The POs are doing it in a different process, and this difference of centralized system could, because in France each PO is doing it, so maybe centralizing the information could be more difficult also to read and be completely sure of how it's doing and who will receive what, because maybe knowing fishers in one PO in one region in France will not receive the same thing as another one in another region, and maybe the information is not that accessible and not that clear for in the system. That it's more clear in Spain because it's completely centralized. Now during the year, we'll focus on this point, for example, about the potential asymmetry information at the infra-annual scale because the information distribution could be asymmetrical within the stakeholders during the year. About the norm change or something like that during the year, depending of the context, the capacity for the stakeholders, for the fishers, for the different institutions to process information, there could be some different access and capacity to read the information within the different stakeholders. So is this equitable? I don't have a clear answer. And it's not the purpose of this work to answer clearly if a situation is equitable or not. But the idea with this framework is to answer if there is some management instruments that could lead toward an equitable situation. If there is some system that allow better information diffusion. If there are tools that are consented and fully legitimate within the systems. So the idea of this work and the frameworks is to going in deep in the French and Spanish system to compare and analyze the systems and better understand if there is some differences that allow more equity within the different system and making wider comparison to get more results and compare different fisheries management system around the world, to also compare different contexts, different culture, because the notion of equity, depending on the culture, could be totally different, and the notion of rights also. So to also get more information and more knowledge about how it could be the decision process, and all the steps could be more or less equitable depending of the context and the culture also. So thanks a lot for your attention. I hope it was clear, and I'm completely happy to receive any questions.
Thank you, Benjamin. Yeah, we don't do this online where we could, but we're virtually. So yeah, we have time for questions, comments.